Good morning, everyone. Perhaps we can start to get settled to begin this session. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Hemispheric Dialogue between civil society, social actors, and government representatives as we prepare for the 9th Summit of the Americas here in Los Angeles, California. This is an essential part of the summit activities I think, for all of us. I know as a citizen of the United States, it addresses fundamental principles. You know, if you go to the Wayback Machine and take a look at the debates about how we formed our own government, even before the approval of our Constitution 233 years ago, there was a debate that it wasn't sufficient, that there had to be amendments, and part of the deal that was cut was that there was a package of 10 amendments that were adopted just 2 years later, and as part of the deal to get over the finish line. The first one assured freedom of religion, the second of speech, the third of the press, and the fourth of assembly, and the final one, the ability to petition your government for the redress of grievances. So, 233 years, 233 years later, that's become an integral part of our principles. And I know these are principles that governments all over this hemisphere share, that governments need to be open to the views of citizenry, the views of civil society, and that such organizations, such groupings of citizens have the right to express their views freely and fully to those who govern them. And in this context, to the group of governments that gather together in this Summit of the Americas that will take place the first full week of June of this year. Welcome. It's important. We want to hear your views and engage with you. That's about it. I now will turn the floor over to my colleague, Ambassador James Lambert, from the Summit's Secretariat. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, distinguished national coordinators, delegates, the representatives of civil society and social actors. In many cases, happy to re-encounter faces and people that we've worked with through previous summit cycles, to be reunited with you again as as a pleasure and also to meet new representatives of civil society and social actors who are bringing your value added, as mentioned by the chair, to this process is very welcome. It's an honor to be here with you this morning and give you all a warm welcome to what I also consider to be a very important encounter, the Hemispheric Dialogue with civil society, social actors, and government representatives, which is one of the important points of intersection between these groups in the framework of the fourth meeting of the Summit and Implementation Review Group and the 9th Summit of the Americas, and one in which our host has given special emphasis and indeed to us instructions that the civil society process be, and the summit as a whole, as inclusive as is possible. Our Summit of the Americas Secretariat, led by Maria Selena Conte as director, is firmly committed to strengthening the participation of civil society and social actors in the summit's process. And this dialogue is organized together with the government of the United States in its capacity as the host country, jointly with our Secretariat, with the objective of providing a space where civil society and social actors can present their contributions to participating countries in the summit's process through the spokespersons of these, and I would say the self-selected spokespersons of each thematic sub-regional working group. Now, of course, they've had an opportunity to interact as civil society members in national dialogues in the capitals of your countries, but this is a very important intersection point with the surge process, so that our considerations may be indeed fertilized and well developed with these inputs coming from yourselves. The thematic sub-regional working groups are aimed at enhancing civil society's impact during the preparatory phase of the summit by providing an opportunity to formulate recommendations on the 5 thematic pillars of the summit, which will be presented to the participating states for their consideration during the negotiation phase. And importantly, around 2,000 representatives have already, through this process, shown interest in participating in the working groups of civil society. So that's a huge number throughout the Americas, and members of the working groups have been actively discussing these summit themes and priorities since the end of March. So this hemispheric dialogue is emerging as a space that offers each of these working groups the opportunity to bring together its members and exchange ideas and lessons learned on the thematic pillars of the 9th Summit, as well as to advance the recommendations that will be presented in the more formal dialogue between social actors and high-level representatives in Los Angeles in June. Therefore, I would like to highlight again the U.S. leadership in the preparation of the summit, and above all its political will and openness in creating opportunities for civil society and social actors, such as on this occasion, and at this meeting that will take place June 6th to 8th. I'd also like to highlight the commitment of our own summit's secretariat. We have been working hard over the last 7 years to improve the quality of the interaction of civil society and social actors in this process, and I like to feel with considerable success and good results in the last summit outcome, and I think we will see it in this summit as well. The meeting of the summit's implementation review group, in which the states are preparing for the 9th Summit, will benefit from the input that these representatives will provide in the dialogue, and we're committed to continue to facilitate this space between participating states and civil society. I thank you all for your attendance this morning, your valuable participation in this important event, and return the floor, Mr. Chair, to you, Kevin O'Reilly, for moderation.
Thank you kindly, Ambassador. And so we turn to discuss and to hear from representatives of the Health and Resilience Group. There are 3 of them, and in turn, some are participating virtually. And in turn, they are Mr. Kendall Trapp of the Empower Yourself Belize movement, followed by Sandra Rosaura Cerato of the Instituto para el Desarrollo Sostenible de la Mujer Lenca de Honduras, and finally, Cecilia Navas of the Youth and Democracy in the Americas. Mr. Trapp, we invite you to address our group, and the floor is yours.
Good morning to all. I am Kendall Trapp from Belize, and below are our proposal. Number 1, a synergetic approach is much needed for the action plan to work without ambiguity. Strategies are needed to improve access to the healthcare services, telemedicine, and digital wellness that will contribute to closing the healthcare gaps. Governments, institutions, civil society, healthcare providers, and medical researchers could develop models for ongoing digital health wellness. Number 2, the Afro-descendant and other ethnic groups, as well as gender groups, must be assured universal healthcare coverage, comprehensive healthcare services with medical consultation at no cost, and prospective of-life course. No one must be left behind, while the most neglected and in need must be first in line. Number 3, when the burden of an illness exists in gender communities, a specific and nuanced consideration of gender is required. Also, an inclusive approach is needed to provide for the healthcare needs of migrants. Number 4, health is compromised when good indigenous agricultural practices are devalued. Many nutrient plants with essential nutrients are not utilized. States should explore the traditional knowledge in biodiversity that comes from indigenous and diasporic population and support mechanisms for knowledge transfer. Number 5, states should develop policies to increase delivery healthcare capacities for the vulnerable and marginalized, increase research and sharing improvements of the state healthcare system, promote prevention and improve outcomes for the vulnerable and other population sectors at risk, improve intergovernmental and subsidiary coordination with civil society and marginalized sectors. Number 6, a commitment to medical research and healthcare measures for mothers and their unborn children is essential. A measure for the termination of the lives of unborn children is not healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trapp. And now we would offer the floor to Sandra Rosaura Serrato. The floor is yours.
Sandra Serrato Flores. Represento a la Mesa de Trabajo de Salud y Resiliencia en Mesoamérica. Hoy quiero presentarles una breve síntesis de las recomendaciones de la sociedad civil del proyecto de compromiso político para la 9ª Cumbre de las Américas, Plan de Acción sobre Salud y Resiliencia. Los jefes de los estados de las Américas firmarán un compromiso con un plan de acción para ejecutarse comenzando en el presente año 2022 hasta el 2030. La sociedad civil, junto a los gobiernos y la empresa privada, tendrán que hacer un acercamiento para ejecutar el plan de acción, dando acceso a nuestros pueblos a un sistema de salud que llegue a cada rincón de nuestras comunidades eficiente y resiliente. El COVID-19 demostró que tenemos una ineficiente falta de preparación en los sistemas de salud ante una pandemia. No podemos obviar que durante la pandemia de COVID-19 dejamos de administrar tratamientos a enfermedades crónicas, infecciosas e infectocontagiosas y tratamientos hormonales, incluyendo procesos de afirmación de género y tratamiento de salud mental. El Plan de Acción de Salud Resiliente incluye la ejecución de programas de liderazgo en salud sexual reproductiva, planificación familiar, los estándares internacionales de derechos humanos en salud que incluya protocolos de atención en los grupos vulnerables, incluyendo a embarazadas sin discriminación y víctimas de violencia y abuso sexual en base a los tratados multilaterales para protección de los derechos humanos, la Declaración Americana de los Derechos y Deberes del Hombre, la Convención Americana sobre Derechos Humanos y los Deberes instrumentos interamericanos de protección que sostienen principios y derechos relevantes para las personas LGTBI, especialmente haciendo énfasis en la protección de derechos de niño y vida familiar. De manera especial, creemos conveniente la revisión de una inmediata práctica que modifique las características sexuales de las personas intersex sin razones médicas fehacientes y sin el pleno consentimiento informado de esta. Incentivar a los Estados miembros a crear políticas de colaboración interna y externa para desarrollar sistemas de salud resilientes. Fomentar el acceso y financiamiento de los Estados miembros con los mecanismos de transparencia, auditoría, anticorrupción para fortalecer los sistemas de salud pública. Que a los trabajadores de la salud se les garanticen los derechos laborales según la Organización Internacional del Trabajo y los protocolos internacionales en materia de pandemia o endemia para resguardar la vida y alcanzar su pleno potencial. Los compromisos en materia de salud deben tener una visión integral que comprenda las necesidades de salud que tienen los grupos poblacionales sin discriminación, transformar los ecosistemas de salud y hacerlos motor de recuperación en el crecimiento económico en la región, promoviendo políticas y logrando así ecosistemas y economías de salud resilientes, inclusivas, sostenibles, equitativas y que para el 2030 se logren los objetivos. El compromiso no solo se eleva a los gobiernos de los estados miembros, sino también a los grupos sociales para que juntos garanticemos sistemas de salud a todos los gobernados de nuestros pueblos.
Thank you very much. And now we offer the floor and invite to address the surge Cecilia Navas from Youth and Democracy in the Americas. Welcome.
Thank you.
Ms. Navas, you have the floor.
Thank you. Gracias, Dios. Buenos días a las y los jefes de delegación, representantes gubernamentales, Secretaría de Cumbres y demás presentes. La salud es un derecho fundamental que debe ser garantizado por los Estados de las Américas. Soy una de las 3 banderas que no gozan de democracia, Estado de Derecho y libertad en nuestra región. Soy de ese país del sur donde escasea la medicina, donde hay un sistema ineficiente de salud. Soy una resiliente de Venezuela. Y para mí es un honor estar hoy aquí en calidad de vocera del Grupo Salud y Resiliencia para Suramérica para presentarles las recomendaciones como actores de sociedad civil. Primero, elaborar un plan de acción transversal puesto en marcha a partir del año 2022 hasta 2030 que recoja un compendio de iniciativas y medidas de cooperación internacional con los siguientes objetivos. Promover la armonización de las normas que rigen los sistemas de salud de las Américas, estableciéndose un plan de nación y presupuestos públicos, así como un mecanismo de seguimiento multiactor para prestar servicios de salud eficaz, eficientes e inclusivos. Crear el entorno idóneo para fabricar y comercializar productos médicos seguros, eficaces y de alta calidad en la región, así como adoptar políticas que apoyen la participación sostenida multisectorial, con inclusión de los sectores de la salud, la ciencia y la tecnología y la industria, manteniendo siempre la transparencia. Fortalecer la educación y capacitación de los profesionales en el campo de la medicina, la salud pública integral y la investigación científica biomédica. Garantizar la transparencia en el suministro oportuno de los medicamentos a la población por parte de los estados, para evitar el derroche presupuestal a causa de la mala administración de los recursos y hacer frente a la corrupción. Promover modelos de servicios dirigidos a víctimas de trata y tráfico y todos los tipos de violencia desde el enfoque de los derechos humanos y que se adecúen a sus necesidades específicas. El plan de acción deberá ser elaborado e implementado con aportes del sector privado, la sociedad civil y otros actores sociales, así como con el apoyo de la Organización de los Estados Americanos, la Organización Panamericana de la Salud, el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo y otros miembros del grupo de trabajo, conjunto de cumbres y los entes autónomos de fiscalización. En ese sentido, es menester que todos los aspectos del plan de acción tengan como eje central los derechos humanos, tomando en cuenta la integración de las diversidades. Este plan de acción es transversal y contiene una perspectiva inclusiva sobre la resiliencia y las necesidades económicas, sociales y culturales de nuestras comunidades, desde un enfoque diferencial y de género, a fin de prepararse y responder ante emergencias actuales y futuras, prestando especial atención a las necesidades y dificultades que enfrentan las poblaciones vulnerables e históricamente marginadas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we have approximately 10 minutes for commentaries or responses by heads of delegation. And inviting any of my colleagues to take the floor. Peru, the floor is yours.
Gracias, presidente. Sí, muy buenos días a todas las delegaciones y a los representantes de la sociedad civil. Agradecemos en primer lugar a la Secretaría de Cumbres, por haber organizado este encuentro y particularmente a los invitados que han compartido sus recomendaciones con relación al compromiso sobre salud y resiliencia. Nosotros vemos al multilateralismo como un espacio de interacción fundamental, pero que se encuentra en permanente evolución, y que ha sabido adaptarse a las nuevas realidades, pasando de una visión estadocéntrica hacia un contexto de apertura y de aporte sustantivo de actores no estatales, sobre la base de la Agenda 2030, como se han indicado los ponentes, y en este caso en el pleno cumplimiento del ODS tercero, el ODS 3 sobre salud y bienestar. Ello permitirá sin duda aprovechar ideas nuevas, originales y estratégicas, como las que se han planteado el día de hoy, y contribuyen al mismo tiempo a fortalecer la estructura democrática de nuestras sociedades. Es por ello que en el compromiso de salud y resiliencia de la cumbre se incorporará un párrafo vinculado al futuro plan de acción, el cual esperamos pueda concluirse hacia la próxima cumbre de las Américas, y en donde se plasmarán ideas concretas para avanzar en este ámbito fundamental sanitario, Entonces, en dicho párrafo, nuestros líderes se comprometen a recibir los aportes de los sectores interesados, particularmente de la sociedad civil y otros espacios sociales, en dicho proceso de configuración del plan de acción, con miras a dotarle de la legitimidad que requiere. Eso es lo que quería informar. Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you kindly. Offering the floor to any other of our colleagues from the heads of delegation. Seeing none, I would like to thank each of the representatives of our health and resilience group for their interventions and for helping inform our discussions and debates. Thank you. And I would like to turn now to a discussion of Our Green Future agenda. We will have three speakers. Onika Angela Stellingberg of the Guyana National Youth Council, followed by social actor Eric Serrano, and finally Sofia Lobo of Aula Abierta. And so I would like to offer the floor first to Onika and Angela Stellingberg from the Guyana National Youth Council. The floor is yours.
Pleasant good morning, everyone. Acknowledging the established protocols, our working group is grateful for the opportunity to work together on these recommendations for implementing the political commitments of the 9th Summit of the Americas. And to this end, we recommend the establishment of a Green Futures Working Group by 2023 to support the implementation of green initiatives mentioned in the political commitments, inclusive also of the Western Hemisphere Convention for Nature Protection and other agreements on migratory species, ocean health, green carbon initiatives, etc. This working group will serve inter alia to build the capacity for CSOs, mobilize funding, share valuable scientific and legal advice while strengthening their resilience in the face of persecution. The OAS should commit to reviewing environmental legislation, strengthening the rule of law, and encourage member countries to enact laws to protect environmental whistleblowers. On the conduct of EIAs, the OAS should develop global best practice guidelines for the EIA process, inclusive of consultation and the management of transboundary impacts. We urge governments to create incentives and opportunities to help small and micro enterprises, farmers, indigenous people, Afro-descendants, and local communities to transition in the new green economy. Special attention should be given to the economic empowerment and inclusion of women and girls in the management of natural resources, growing their participation as leaders and decision makers to 75% by 2025. We strongly encourage governments to prioritize food security and strengthen local and regional food systems for countries to produce more of their own food. Noting the rapid development of the oil and gas sector in the Southeast Caribbean, we urge the OAS members to develop the oil and gas sector plan and commit to ensuring that it is consistent with Paris Agreement goals. We recommend a greater effort to promote the inclusion of the private sector in the development and promotion of alternatives to plastic. We note that to fully implement the Lima, Peru Statement on Gender Equity and Empowerment, the OAS must begin the process of deploying working groups to further affect policy and culture change. We encourage governments to sign up to the Food and Land Use Coalition, ensuring financial flows and trade agreements do not support deforestation, and create national legislation that makes it illegal for companies and financial institutions to fuel deforestation. We welcome this opportunity to provide further input and guidance into the management of natural resources and human capital within our region, and look forward to the upcoming dialogue. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And we now offer the floor to Eric Serrano. The floor is yours.
Hola, buenos días. Ante la urgencia de la crisis climática y la vulnerabilidad del hemisferio, el Grupo de Trabajo Nuestro Futuro Verde Mesoamérica insta a las y los jefes de Estado y Gobierno de las Américas a promover la declaración de los líderes de Glasgow sobre los bosques y el uso de la tierra, los compromisos nacionales sobre la deforestación y la conservación, así como la labor regional de eliminación de la deforestación y la conservación del ecosistema. Incorporar en todas las acciones gubernamentales que buscan hacer frente al cambio climático los conocimientos ecológicos tradicionales y la protección de los recursos culturales, naturales y el hábitat de los pueblos, comunidades indígenas, rurales y afrodescendientes. Eliminar la deforestación de la producción y el consumo agrícola mediante políticas públicas en colaboración con los sectores de producción mayoristas y minoristas, promulgar leyes que garanticen la protección de las y los defensores del medio ambiente, con un enfoque interseccional que considere las vulneraciones particulares que enfrentan las mujeres, las comunidades indígenas, rurales y afrodescendientes. Apoyar con recursos técnicos y financieros el sector agrícola en la reducción de las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, mediante la mejora de las prácticas agrícolas, incluyendo un enfoque inclusivo de agricultura climática inteligente, que reduzca las emisiones y mejore la resiliencia en los efectos del cambio climático. Realizar acciones para la descarbonificación del sector transporte marítimo y la descarbonificación de los puertos marítimos y fluviales del hemisferio. Incorporar de manera permanente los riesgos climáticos en los planes, políticas, operaciones y presupuestos para generar resiliencia en las acciones gubernamentales. Instar a los Estados miembros para implementar cambios necesarios para que las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, actores sociales y el sector privado tengan representación permanente e institucionalizada en el contexto de las cumbres. Gracias.
Thank you very much. And now we turn to and offer the floor to Sofía Lobo of Aula Abierta.
Estimadas y estimados representantes de la sociedad civil, actores sociales, representantes gubernamentales y demás presentes. Como representante del subgrupo de trabajo Nuestro Futuro Verde América del Sur, presentamos las siguientes recomendaciones a las y los jefes de Estado y de Gobierno de las Américas con respecto a la urgente necesidad de restaurar y conservar los ecosistemas de la región. 1. Se recomienda redoblar esfuerzos para trabajar a través de organizaciones regionales en conjunto con la sociedad civil, instituciones académicas y científicas, empresas y demás actores sociales para desarrollar para fines de 2022 un plan nacional para lograr la meta de cero neto en emisiones y deforestación, conservar y proteger el 30% de las tierras y el agua para 2030 y los compromisos del desafío de Bonn. Se insta a que dicho plan esté acompañado de un cronograma viable y transparente, garantizando la inclusividad y rendición de cuentas a los ciudadanos con respecto a su ejecución. Se solicita proteger a los pueblos indígenas, afrodescendientes, mujeres, niñas, campesinos y otras comunidades desfavorecidas, así como sus recursos culturales, acogiendo el Plan del Decenio Internacional para Afrodescendientes. Se insta a respetar y garantizar integralmente la seguridad y la vida de los defensores del medio ambiente, según los estándares del Acuerdo de Escazú, en virtud de garantizar el debido proceso judicial de los crímenes ambientales. 2. A fin de disminuir la cantidad de carbono que se emite por el uso de la tierra, se solicita la reducción de emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero por parte de todos los sectores que generan grandes emisiones, mejorando las prácticas de producción climáticamente inteligentes e implementando las NDC, siguiendo la vía de 1.5 grados Celsius. 3. Para aprovechar el poder del océano y las masas de agua para mitigar el cambio climático, se exhorta el desarrollo de capacidades para abordar la contaminación por plástico en todos los cuerpos de agua, mediante la gestión de residuos, a través del intercambio entre gobierno, sociedad civil, universidades y demás partes interesadas, apoyando el fortalecimiento de los centros de investigación ambiental en las regiones. Se insta a realizar un esfuerzo coordinado para mitigar los derrames petroleros y las descargas de aguas residuales y el cumplimiento de las normas ambientales internacionales marítimas. 4. Para acelerar las medidas sobre la adaptación al cambio climático, se insta a los gobiernos de las Américas a finalizar, publicar e implementar estrategias nacionales de adaptación en conjunto con la sociedad civil, instituciones académicas, empresas, comunidades locales y demás actores sociales, así como comprometerse al cumplimiento de las metas. Se insta a mejorar el acceso a la información climática para fortalecer los sistemas de alerta temprana en la respuesta a los efectos climáticos en todos los sectores y escalas. Finalmente, se insta a mejorar la educación y la capacitación en materia ambiental de la ciudadanía en general y de los encargados de la formulación de políticas públicas, con un enfoque étnico y sociocultural. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we offer the floor to heads of delegation if they wish to make any response to our speakers on the Our Green Future agenda. Ecuador, the floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias, presidente, y buenos días a todas y todos. Tengo el gusto de hablar en nombre de mi país, pero también como haber tenido el honor de copresidir el grupo de trabajo Nuestro Futuro Verde y Sostenible. Al mismo tiempo, agradecer las presentaciones de la sociedad civil, manifestarles que muchísimas, gran parte, si no todas, las preocupaciones que ustedes han manifestado en sus presentaciones están recogidas en el texto que hemos venido trabajando en los últimos meses entre todas las delegaciones. Con un claro enfoque de inclusividad, de diálogo y apertura para la participación de la sociedad civil y todos los actores, sector privado, académico, sector público, en cooperación con organismos internacionales para montar agendas nacionales, regionales, de cara a enfrentar esta problemática que sin duda no solamente es preocupación suya, sino de todos y cada uno de los pobladores de nuestro hemisferio. Así que nos congratulamos de saber que estamos sincronizados, tenemos el mismo enfoque y entonces vamos a seguir avanzando. Eso es lo más importante, con la participación propositiva de todos ustedes. Gracias.
And inviting the interventions of many other heads of delegation. Seeing none, I'd like to take this quick moment, and I suspect I speak on behalf of everybody here, to offer condolences to the people of the city of Havana and of Cuba after an apparent gas leak destroyed Havana's historic hotel Saratoga. And we hope and pray, of course, that for as little in the way of loss of life and damage as possible, and hope for the rapid recovery of anyone who is injured, and extend our thoughts to the families of anyone who's lost their lives in that explosion earlier this morning. With that, I'd like to offer my thanks to our friends and colleagues, and we turn now to the clean energy agenda. And we have three representatives to speak to us today. Social actor Hernando Viveros, Danilza Mavelis Peña Medina, and John Osvaldo Galvez Massa of the Fundación Misión Verde, who will be speaking to us virtually. And so first, we offer the floor to Mr. Viveros. The floor is yours.
Señores y señoras jefes de delegación, embajadores, Secretaría de Cumbres, Grupo de Revisión de la Implementación de Cumbres, Coordinador Nacional de los Estados Unidos para el Proceso de Cumbres, y mis colegas miembros de la sociedad civil y actores sociales, reciban un cordial y afectuoso saludo. Acelerar la transición de energía limpia. Recomendaciones. Primero, implementación y ratificación de todos los países de las Américas del Acuerdo de Escazú, como herramienta para la protección de la democracia ambiental en las Américas, la protección del derecho a la vida de los líderes ambientales y sus organizaciones que cuidan y protegen nuestro medio ambiente y hábitat. 2. Tomar nota del principio 10 de la Declaración de Río Ambiente de elaborar e implementar un plan de acción para avanzar en la consecución de un acuerdo regional u otro instrumento que asegure la plena implementación de los derechos de acceso a la información, participación y justicia en materia ambiental y problemas en materia de energía limpia para América Latina y el Caribe. Hacemos un llamado a los líderes de los países de las Américas a tomar las medidas necesarias para reducir las emisiones, movilizar fondos y promover la adaptación y la resiliencia, además de presentar ambiciosos objetivos de reducción de emisiones de CO2 para el 2030 que se alineen con alcanzar el cero neto para mediados del siglo. Recomendamos a los países de las Américas acelerar la implementación y puesta en marcha del Acuerdo de París sobre Cambio Climático y acuerdos y convenios posteriores con el fin de proteger el medio ambiente, consolidar la transparencia global y la adaptación al cambio climático. Adoptar medidas adecuadas y efectivas para reconocer, proteger y promover todos los derechos de las personas defensoras de derechos humanos en materia ambiental, incluyendo su derecho a la vida, la integridad personal, la libertad de opinión y expresión, el derecho de reunión y asociación pacífica y el derecho a circular libremente. Elaborar estrategias regionales y por país con enfoque étnico diferenciado para los pueblos afrodescendientes y las comunidades indígenas para promover el desarrollo sostenible con la identidad cultural de sus poblaciones, asegurar la tenencia de la tierra de las poblaciones rurales y la implementación de programas de pago por servicios ecosistémicos, apoyar programas de manejo forestal y erosión costera. Crear fideicomisos con aportes del sector público-privado para financiar políticas y programas de adaptación y mitigación del cambio climático y nuevas formas de energía limpia. Asegurar que los actores que implementan proyectos en la región incluyan la variable étnico-racial en todos los formatos de captura de información sobre cambio climático, incluyendo el programa de la implementación del Decenio Internacional de los Afrodescendientes. Implementar la declaración de COICA de las comunidades indígenas sobre la protección del 80% de la cuenca amazónica y fortalecer los sistemas de gobernanza local y territorial. Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Viveros. And now we offer the floor to Ms. Peña Medina. The floor is yours.
Muy buenos días. Saludos a los representantes de los países, en especial al país anfitrión y a la Secretaría de Cumbres. Nosotros, las y los actores sociales y las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, proponemos las siguientes encomiendas. 1. Que la disminución de generación de energía con el carbón sea de forma escalonada hasta el 2025 y se estudien opciones como el gas natural. 2. Instituir planes de financiación pública de proyectos de generación de energía limpia. 3. Que la sustitución del carbón y los combustibles fósiles ineficientes por tecnologías de energía limpia sean con un plan y de impulso económico con el sector privado. 4. Incluir a todos los actores del sector energético con el objetivo de establecer una agenda de consensos hacia una transición de energía limpia. 5. Impulsar al sector privado y a los bancos a fin de facilitar financiación de proyectos de energía limpia. 6. Promover políticas públicas que estimulen el impulso de todas las fuentes de energías limpias, tales como disminución de impuestos, menos costos con el pago de la luz, intercambios comerciales con países cercanos, capacitación sobre sectores energéticos, entre otros. 7. Fomentar alianzas públicas privadas con el objetivo de impulsar más fondos económicos del sector privado con enfoque a la energía limpia. 8. Que las instituciones públicas educativas de los países fomenten planes de capacitación en el sector eléctrico con enfoque de energía limpia, a los fines de que jóvenes puedan profesionalizarse en energía limpia a fin de que contribuyan y aporten ideas tecnológicas y de innovación sobre esta temática. 9. Implementar políticas públicas que estimulen la investigación en el impulso de nuevas tecnologías a fin de apoyar la transición a la energía limpia y, finalmente, impulsar condiciones económicas que mitiguen iniciativas de acceso al financiamiento y edificación de los proyectos energéticos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And now we turn to the virtual participation from Mr. Galvez Massa. The floor is yours.
Cordial a todos los presentes. Permítanme exponer a continuación como grupo de Sudamérica el tema de transición a energías limpias. Es un tema muy interesante, sobre todo que lo hemos planteado los actores sociales de este grupo, porque es importante considerar que para acelerar la transición a energía limpia hay que ir hacia un modelo sostenible, seguro, eficiente y competitivo, el cual permita sustituir la producción de energías contaminantes como gasolinas fósiles a energías limpias, con el propósito de impulsar la descarbonización, la eficiencia energética, las energías renovables y la descarbonización de las economías. Otro elemento a considerar a este debate fue bajar los niveles de deforestación, el uso de químicos en la agricultura y la cultura de consumo y alimentación, para el cual se propone impulsar políticas energéticas eficientemente en base a una planificación adecuada para alcanzar el tan famosa descarbonización o bajar el CO2. Para lograr este objetivo no será tan difícil, ya que generalmente la gran mayoría de estos países cuentan con energía solar y energías eólicas, sobre todo, existentes. A esto se le suma la gran tecnología que tiene actualmente el mundo, que puede convertir estas energías a energías limpias. Sin embargo, para consolidar esta propuesta, hay que ir también a tomar parte dentro de las legislaciones ambientales de cada país, las políticas constitucionales, donde se proponga severos artículos que puedan garantizar sobre todo el uso y el manejo sostenible de los recursos naturales. Finalmente, se debe proponer un control, un monitoreo de los compromisos adquiridos ahora en esta cumbre, midiendo anualmente a cada país sus avances y planes de acción transparentes para la mitigación, restauración de los impactos negativos que genera el uso del petróleo, metano, etc. Se debe utilizar equipos tecnológicos para medir el CO2 anualmente, identificar cuántos programas y proyectos de energías limpias han avanzado anualmente y con esto se está constituyendo el uso de las gasolinas. Para lograr un mayor control y eficiencia en la transición energética de cada país, lo que permitirá bajar el calentamiento global, eliminar el subsidio y financiamiento a todo proyecto que utiliza energías de carbón o petróleo, ir a un transporte público, energético y limpio. Creemos que estas son algunas propuestas que hemos consolidado como grupo en Sudamérica y que deben ser tomadas en cuenta dentro de esta cumbre. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galvez. And now we offer the floor to any heads of delegation that wish to comment on or respond to the interventions that we have heard. Dominican Republic, the floor is yours.
Muy buenos días, señor presidente. Muchas gracias por darnos la oportunidad de hablar en este foro y poder compartir con la sociedad civil los pasos que se han estado dando a lo largo de estas reuniones de trabajo. Queremos expresarle a la sociedad civil que muchas de sus inquietudes están siendo contempladas en el proyecto de transición hacia energía limpia. Queremos también resaltar de que hay un foro de lo que se llama Futuro Verde. Y es importante que diferenciemos porque hay muchas iniciativas destinadas a la parte de suelo, reforestación que están contempladas en el Foro de Trabajo Futuro Verde, y la parte de energía limpia es la parte que compete directamente a la descarbonización a través del uso de fuentes energéticas. Queremos expresarle que dentro del grupo de trabajo de energía limpia, de los principales puntos que se están tomando en cuenta es utilizar combustible de transición, la incorporación de energías renovables, el apego al Acuerdo de París, la captura del metano y la incorporación de sistemas de transporte que sean descontaminantes. Queremos también resaltar que actualmente todos los países reportan, en inglés se llaman NDC, en castellano le decimos las contribuciones nacionalmente determinadas, donde se pueden ver en las páginas de lo que es el compromiso de cambio climático, las contribuciones nacionalmente determinadas por cada país y la reducción de las emisiones de CO2 que se están viendo. Eso le puede servir a la sociedad civil para monitorear el verdadero esfuerzo que cada país está haciendo. En particular, República Dominicana, que se le dio la oportunidad de dirigir esta mesa de trabajo, anuncia que una forma de mitigar el riesgo para las inversiones en energía renovable que nosotros hemos implementado ha sido asignar contratos de compra de energía con garantía soberana, lo que nos permitió el año pasado poder asignar contratos de compra de energía por potencia instalada de 500 megavatios en energía solar. Eso nos convertirá en el país con más energía renovable instalada de toda la región en los próximos 3 años. Actualmente somos el líder en energía renovable instalada en todo el Caribe, con una potencia instalada de 1.300 megavatios instalados. No obstante, queremos resaltar que en el continente americano tenemos la mayor cantidad de países carbono neutral o con el 100% de su energía producida de fuentes renovables, que es un esfuerzo muy diferenciado a los otros continentes y del cual nosotros nos sentimos muy agradecidos y muy orgullosos. Tenemos países como Uruguay, donde el 97% de su energía es producido de fuentes renovables, y eso es algo que cuando vamos a otros continentes no lo encontramos. La decisión que hemos visto en el grupo de trabajo es firme hacia un futuro verde, un futuro descarbonizado y una energía descarbonizada. Así es que le podemos asegurar que estamos en línea con sus deseos, con sus planteamientos y que estamos trabajando hacia eso. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Guatemala, the floor is yours.
Gracias, muy buenos días a todos. En nombre del Gobierno de la República de Guatemala, deseamos presentar nuestro más cordial saludo a todos los asistentes, agradecer a los representantes de los diferentes foros por las presentaciones y los discursos compartidos. También queremos agradecer a la Presidencia para facilitar estos espacios de discusión constructivos que contribuyen a identificar realidades y prioridades comunes que debemos de atender, en particular para un futuro verde y construir y transformarnos hacia energías limpias. Queremos ser la voz de todos aquellos que no la tienen. En virtud de esto, para el Gobierno de Guatemala, existe un compromiso para que en este importante encuentro que vamos a reunir a jefes de Estado y de Gobierno podamos desarrollar estrategias para promover la conservación del medio ambiente y caminar hacia un futuro verde que incluya la transición a energías limpias. Guatemala es uno de los países de más riesgo y vulnerabilidad a causa de los eventos climatológicos y a pesar de ello seguimos recuperándonos por los daños generados por los desastres naturales, lo cual ha obligado a realizar esfuerzos para rehabilitar los servicios, infraestructura pública y la producción agropecuaria, por lo que compartimos prioridades y desafíos en la región. Por ello, durante esta cumbre estamos trabajando para la construcción de una agenda común, con especial énfasis en la adaptación y la resiliencia, así como en garantizar accesos a energía asequible, segura, sostenible y moderna. Queremos tomar medidas nacionales sobre las cuales ya estamos avanzando, que incluyen alianzas con el sector público y privado para construir sobre lo ya avanzado y reducir las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, por lo que valoramos como un aporte significativo y guía el compromiso político hacia la transición hacia la energía limpia y renovable. Cuenten con Guatemala para poder trabajar en un modelo sostenible y competitivo que sea de beneficio para el planeta y para las poblaciones. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And now the chair recognizes the delegate from Barbados. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I would not want this opportunity to go without taking the floor on behalf of the Government of Barbados to register the importance to us of the dialogue with the civil society of the region, or third sector as we term it in Barbados. In Barbados, we have a practice generally of engaging with civil society or the third sector in the formulation of policies to be implemented by government and which would affect the entire population. So engagement with civil society is not unknown to us. And we welcome very much that this is a plank or platform in the Summit of the Americas, and that colleagues from civil society have come to us here in person today and generally. I've chosen to speak on this particular area simply because in Barbados we actually have quite strong and influential might be the wrong word, but it can make a difference, civil society actors in the renewable energy area. Renewable energy has been identified for some time now as a key area which Barbados is at an entrepreneurial level is very active in, and through solar using the use of solar power. But we have emerged over the last few years a renewable energy entity who looks at all of the areas that we are going to want to go in, be it when more solar power, excuse me, increased use of photovoltaic systems for energy generation, or be it wind turbine. We don't have anything to burn for biofuels, but we have, obviously we're surrounded by the ocean, and so looking at some form of, although it's very expensive, hydro generation can be in our future. I would note also that in terms of use of energy efficiency, the government of Barbados has, like many of us around here, has committed to become fossil fuel free by, I think it's 2030. And we are working towards that. And one of the ways that earlier this year in the budget, the Prime Minister of Barbados would have sought to incentivize this is by making it easy, facilitating the placement on households, everyone's household, of photovoltaic cells, which would then cut down the amount of electricity that is being purchased from the electrical Barbados Light and Power, which of course is right now is largely based on fossil energy. So there are several measures, and this initiative, I should say, I hesitate to use the word subsidization. Some of us around here might go to the World Trade Organization. But this incentivization is meant to allow the common man, the person who does not necessarily have that capital in hand, to move to cleaner energy. So the and working with the man in the street and working with civil society is very important for the government in moving the country forward. I'd like to thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for those comments, recognizing the delegation from Paraguay. Paraguay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Muy buenos días a todos. Dada la importancia del tema de la energía limpia para mi país, solamente quisiera agradecer las presentaciones realizadas y confirmar que Paraguay posee un sistema eléctrico basado casi exclusivamente en la generación de energía eléctrica a partir de una fuente renovable y no contaminante, la hidroenergía. No obstante, mi país también es consciente del desafío que aún representa el acceso a la energía eléctrica en igualdad de condiciones y continúa apostando firmemente al objetivo de direccionar la abundancia en generación de esta energía eléctrica limpia y renovable. Desde el punto de vista del consumo, estamos comprometidos a impulsar una matriz energética más sostenible, de manera que ésta se compatibilice con el desarrollo económico, social y ambiental y se garanticen altas prácticas de rendimiento energético. Dicha condición refuerza la natural inclinación de mi país hacia la inversión en fuentes energéticas renovables, apuntando a la eficiencia y a la sostenibilidad en la búsqueda de potenciar la seguridad energética para las actuales y futuras generaciones, considerando como uno de sus principales objetivos el acceso universal a energía eléctrica de calidad, junto al incremento de la utilización de energías renovables y la reducción del consumo de combustibles fósiles. A este respecto, la política energética, mi país tiene una política energética 2040, en la cual se reafirma el compromiso de atender el trilema de la energía: seguridad energética, equidad y sostenibilidad ambiental. Finalmente, quisiera ratificar el compromiso de Paraguay de su intención de consolidarse como eje de integración de energética regional con base en el aprovechamiento sostenible de sus recursos naturales y su estratégica localización geográfica, potenciando a través de proyectos de integración beneficios que redunden en el bienestar de la población, no solo de los paraguayos, sino también de la región. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other requests for the floor, I would like to offer my thanks. And we turn now to our digital transformation agenda. And we will have three speakers: Francisco Barajas from the Latino Community Foundation, Ronmel Lopez of the White and Blue Support for Nicaragua, and Mariano Mosqueda from the Universidad Católica de Córdoba. And we will turn first to Mr. Barajas.
Thank you.
And Mr. Barajas, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Francisco Barajas, and I'm representing the Northern Hemisphere, which include the US, Canada, and the Caribbean. And I'm with the Latino Community Foundation based here in California with the mission to unleash the civic and economic empowerment of Latinos in the state. And I respectfully present our recommendations for the 9th Summit of Americas. The recommendations provided by our group are aimed at closing the digital divide and drafting regulations that will foster a safer cyber world for all people. We propose 3 areas that governments must acknowledge in order to truly achieve transforming the digital world. First, elected officials should acknowledge the internet as a human right. Second, safety regulations and policies must be adopted to prevent AI discriminatory practices and to further protect human and privacy rights. And finally, governments must take preventative measures that protect against shutting down, blocking, or throttling the internet. A comprehensive human rights-based approach that strives at closing the digital divide will bring us closer to creating a more reliable and accessible broadband ecosystem. It is no longer effective to think of the internet access in terms of affordability due to the vast economic differences. In order to truly promote an inclusive digital society where everyone benefits, we implore governments to acknowledge the internet, particularly in the context of COVID-19, as a human right. Governments must address barriers such as poverty, race, and gender by including fair and transparent market regulations, universal service requirements, and licensing agreements. We implore governments to work together to develop a universal declaration of digital rights. Internet access needs to also be paired with security measures that protect individual user data and that prevents coding biases. Invasions of online privacy and data breaches violate an individual's human rights and leaves them vulnerable for possible cyber crimes. Furthermore, online sexual exploitation and abuse particularly impact and violate the rights of women and girls. Private sector entities must work alongside governments to safeguard against online violence that target women and girls, LGBTQI+ people, migrants and refugees, and human rights defenders. This means adopting legally binding regulations and standards that govern information sharing. In addition, governments must administer and set guardrails for AI programmers to mitigate the risk of face recognition discrimination and coding biases. And finally, we strongly encourage governments to condemn internet shutdowns, particularly through country-specific statements issued during regional and international human rights platforms and sessions. States must distribute more internet exchange points, along with increasing the diversity of internet connectivity at international borders to frustrate the efforts of these shutdowns. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your remarks, Mr. Barajas, and we offer the floor now to Mr. Lopez. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the invitation. My name is Romero Lopez, as you mentioned. Thank you, Ms. James Lambert, and all of you. Thank you for the invitation. So my name is Romero Lopez. I'm from Nicaragua, and I'm part of the group Nicaragua Nueva Generación, and White and Blue Support for Nicaragua. Hoy soy parte de miles de voces.
I'm one of thousands of voices, and I'm for the political, for the 9th. This is my summary of our political commitment. In 2011, the presidents of the Americas renewed in Canada the commitment to hemispheric integration and national responsibility and to improve the economic well-being and security of the people. And the 9th summit is the draft digital transformation commitment is an opportunity for health and communication and manufacturing and entrepreneurship. Today, we are focused, we want to have states focus on the importance of the creation of controls and the uses of platforms to protect confidentiality, privacy, and personal data, particularly in countries where human rights are not protected, affirming the essential role of digital ecosystems that are resilient and dynamic to support prosperous digital economies, modernizing preparation in response to future climate phenomena, health, anti-corruption, the respect for human fundamental rights and freedoms. We must give, this must give rise to investment in improving public services. In the pandemic, we saw the scope of the digital divide, underscoring the importance of access to internet, digital education, access to public services, access to a portal of health, virtual health, and access to broadband, recognizing the need for greater regional cooperation that includes private sector, civil society, and other social actors to formulate policies for digital ecosystems that increase economic growth, regional competitiveness, responsible and ethical use of technology, and that don't violate human rights. We urge facilitating access at competitive prices that is universal with internet, broadband, digital transformation of government by 2030. This plan of action is a commitment where civil society, private sector, and states have an opportunity to work together, protecting the human rights, privacy of citizens, underscore economy, health, education, placing our nations at a more competitive level, provided that there is assurance of creation of laws in accordance with that protect privacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lopez. And now we turn to Mr. Mosqueira. You have the floor.
Saludos a los
Greetings, representatives of the countries and colleagues from civil society organizations. Civil society and social actors in South America propose the following recommendations. Digital access, consider it a human right with open and interoperable and safe with access to digital platforms for all members of society. It's essential that the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights build specific standards to protect the human rights on internet, beginning with the protection and privacy of data for citizens. Digital transformation should strive to cover digital literacy and greater coverage of vulnerable groups. It should also place technology at the service of persons with disability. There must be a gender-based approach, an intercultural approach. There should be transparency and accountability in the use of digital platforms. There has to be ethical use of artificial intelligence and establishing independent watchdogs and auditors. There should be decentralization of data and information to avoid control and manipulation thereof. We believe that there should be a favoring of more open government practices in all areas of government. So digital transformation is important use in anti-corruption efforts. We have to try to create open code tools. Digital transformation should help to create intelligent use of devices and government, and in this context, it should have bring about greater democratic participation. One important recommendation for our organizations in South America is that digital transformation requires a new legal framework to safeguard human rights with a gender-based approach, avoiding polarization and manifestations of authoritarianism, hate speech, extortion, aggression, incitement to violence through technology. In this context, digital transformation should consider a legal framework that considers human rights in the judicial processes. And lastly, as an operational proposal, the organizations of South America, we believe that digital transformation in an important dynamic context requires follow-up of the 9th Summit of the Americas commitments. So we propose the creation of observatory of digital transformation for public sector, academia, and civil society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mosqueda. And now we offer the floor to heads of delegation, that might wish to comment on or respond to the interventions we have just heard. Colombia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to each and every one of you. A particular greeting to the representatives of civil society and social actors who have joined us this morning. I wanted to make a few remarks on the issue of the topic of digital transformation as delegation of Colombia and as co-chair of the working group in charge of this particular commitment. Firstly, I wanted to mention that we are very much in agreement. We concur wholeheartedly with most of the comments made by the representatives thus far. And in one way or another, this is reflected in the commitment or the commitments that are set forth in this document about digital transformation. Obviously, in the document, we have 4 major chapters. It's divided up in this way that talks about digital ecosystems, open digital government, cybersecurity is the third, and the fourth is economic growth and competitiveness. Those are the 4 chapters. You all just mentioned all of those chapters, and this is a reflection of the importance of digital transformation and how the pandemic showed all countries that there indeed is a huge digital divide and that we must close it. And the need for all countries and citizens have more ready access to internet. We've developed a chapter, we've hashed out a chapter where we talk about digital ecosystems, and we underscore the importance of these digital ecosystems, so to speak. And indeed, we highlighted that cooperation and education and training on these topics are absolutely essential to be able to endure all these troubles that afflict us in terms of competitiveness and economic growth. And at the same time to bring under control cyber crime, as you all have pointed out in particular. So as co-chair, as the delegation of Colombia, I think we're all on the same page. And I'm very grateful for all the comments that you've made. And rest assured, we are going to take them into account, and they will be reflected one way or another in the commitment. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. And offering the floor to any other delegations that might wish to comment on this item of our agenda. Jamaica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone. As the other co-chair from Jamaica, which I have the honor to help support our distinguished colleague from Colombia on this working group on digital transformation, I also wanted to extend my thanks and appreciation to the representatives of civil society for the points that were raised this morning, and to concur, as has been eloquently stated by Colombia, that many of the issues which you have raised are finding their way into this political commitment. I also wanted to indicate on behalf of Jamaica that for us, the move towards a digital economy is very important, as not only as a way of ensuring that we were able to recover from the effects of the pandemic, but also as we move towards a developmental thrust that takes into account the realities of the world in which we now operate. Therefore, for us, it's very important that countries are able to have the opportunity to participate equitably in the digital economy in pursuit of their development. So thank you so much again.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other heads of delegation wishing to speak? If not, we offer our sincere thanks to the three of you. And we turn now, excuse me, we turn now to discuss the democratic governance agenda. And we have three speakers invited to join us. Gil Mohammed Oxley, social actor, Luis Antonio Martinez from Human Life International, and Diana Silva from the Red Latinoamericana del Caribe por la Democracia, REDLAD. And it's my pleasure first to offer the floor to Gail Mohammed Oxley. The floor is yours. The floor is almost yours.
Excuse me, you have to reset your timer because the name change will
Of course.
accommodate a couple seconds. Thank you. All protocols observed. Good morning, everyone. Commitment is doing what you said you would do after feeling what you said it in has passed. Democratic governance in the region of Canada, CARICOM, and the USA has evolved into a showdown of might. Civil society is being introduced as the other scale in measuring democracy as we address human rights, transparency and anti-corruption, citizen participation and inclusion. Civil society accepts the action plan with some additions to the commitments, the draft commitments. This working group wants the summit to achieve strong representative democracies where an independent, liberated sector of CSOs, NGOs, and FBOs, not party groups, partner with governments to achieve the goal of this work plan. Allocation of resources to foster sector capacity and growth is an immediate must. The multinational funding partners must give access to local civil society for meaningful involvement that will make the projects launched with their loans and grants more likely to succeed beyond government administration of the day. Good character, fueled by faith, hope, love, charity, humility, perseverance, patience, and obedience, is the antidote to corruption. Transparency and anti-corruption databases must follow up action consisting of non-partisan citizens and at least one judicial officer to oversee these platforms. Recommendations must use data-informed approaches to highlight the threat to democracy which social media platforms use to spreading prejudices via misinformation and anti-democratic threats, resulting in negatively changed behaviors. Restating and revisiting commitments made, re-inclusion of the follow-up and implementation requires civil society to remind governments of their responsibility to include everyone. OS nations must establish policies that remove barriers, including those practices of colonial definitions and legislative impositions that create discrimination and deter liberty from its citizenry. Embrace the challenge to partner with nonpartisan civil society as we move forward together towards the 10th summit. Make this an achievable summit, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And now we offer the floor to Luis Antonio Martinez. You have the floor.
I wish to express my appreciation to the Summit Secretariat, to the Review and Implementation Group of the Summit, and to the Joint Working Group of the Summit, and all of you representatives of the governments for your interest and your commitment to social actors and civil society, underscoring that the participation and validation of civil society is indispensable to make legitimate the agreements and democratic commitment of states the current working group proposes to guarantee the right to freedom of expression, association, assembly, and movement on the basis of the Inter-American Convention on Human Rights, the Democratic Charter, and the political constitution of each country. For the protection also of journalists, social communicators, human rights defenders, migrants, environmental defenders, and social actors, to allow them to do their work without risk of reprisals, threats, or criminal prosecution, as well as of their families. Member states, in coordination with human rights organizations, must take all measures necessary to eradicate forced labor, human trafficking, sexual exploitation, harassment, and discrimination in the work site, with the participation of civil society, community leaders, social actors, labor unions, and representatives of private sector. Take concrete and efficient measures to eradicate discrimination and violence to guarantee human rights and inclusion of all persons, and principally of those people who historically have been excluded. Fourth, eradicate child sexual abuse and exploitation, forced marriage, trafficking of girls, boys, and adolescents by means of the enactment of laws, policies, and programs that would prevent, intervene, and prosecute conduct that is a threat to life, security, and the integrity of people at all stages of development. To guarantee and protect the rights of people, indigenous communities, rural communities, and Afro-descendant, access to land, to the territory, and to a healthy and balanced environment, as well as the right to free determination. 6, establish surveillance institutions that would follow on the commitment of member states with electronic governance and open governments. 7, promote and strengthen participatory processes for planning and recovering post-COVID-19 pandemic and climate crisis, using the best practices and with the necessary resources for greater health and welfare of the population, bridging the digital divide, supporting employment and the economic recovery and integration of families. 8, implement necessary changes for organizations of civil society, social actors, and the private sector would be permanently represented in the SURGE and GTCC processes, as well as an active and collaborative participation in CISCA. Number 9, give technical assistance to the states to designate a budget for the execution and enactment of the actions of this document, as well as follow-up and implementation for this. Thank you very much, and may God bless the Americas. Good morning. As organizations of the civil society of Latin America and the Caribbean, we recommend the creation of an inter-American network of civil society organization with the character of an ombudsman organization to follow up on the fulfillment of the political commitments assumed by the states in this and future summits of the Americas, as well as to annually report to the SURGE and to civil society, to reach consensus based on a panel of experts on a regional definition of disturbances of the constitutional order, including what is understood by early warnings, accelerate the recognition of refugee status and the application of the right to asylum to those persons seeking international protection, advancing in the creation of a migration framework for the Americas that would make it possible to respond from a rights-based approach to the challenges of internal displacement, refuge, and migration. Develop an inter-American evaluation plan on the protection measures available for human rights defenders and journalists, and strengthen or create internal mechanisms to preserve their human integrity. Promote the integration of vulnerable groups in the country's popular elections, especially for transgender persons, persons with disabilities, and the elderly. To promote strategies that would encourage the nomination of a diversity of candidates, particularly for groups with a political representation deficit. Eliminate forced labor, child labor, and any form of violence against women, against LGBTIQ persons, African American communities, indigenous people, people with disabilities, older adults, migrants, amongst others, as well as eliminate harassment and discrimination in the workplace. Protect the rights of women and girls in all of their diversity with a right to life free from violence by means of a new global treaty. In the area of transparency and anti-corruption, which continues to be a challenge in our region, we propose encouraging whistleblowing and the protection of whistleblowers and identifying and redressing victims of corruption, encourage and facilitating the reporting of irregular government actions as well as corruption, including money laundering, implement and disseminate public consultations by using user-friendly technology platforms in the policy and legislative processes, promote gender equality and women's participation and empowerment, as well as the inclusion of women and girls indigenous peoples, Afro-descendants, LGBTQI+ persons, those elderly, and well as persons with disabilities and migrants and vulnerable and marginalized populations, from the planning process as well as in the implementation and evaluation. Ensure policies, platforms, and tools for procurement that is open, transparent, and accessible. Strengthen international cooperation in anti-corruption to improve the exchange of information in investigating and prosecuting acts of corruption. Criminalize acts of solicitation or acceptance of bribes and the bribery of national public officials, of foreign public officials, and officials of international agencies and organizations. Create working groups with members of civil society and national legislatures to follow up on the recommendations of MESICIC. As well, include strategies for dissemination and training in the use of these proposed mechanisms, as well as the joint work between the SURGE, the Joint Summit Working Group, civil society, and the private sector in order to evaluate the progress of governments with respect to the implementation of the action plan prior to the 10th Summit of the Americas. We believe we need to work together. We need to develop a multi-actor strategy and take these types of specific actions that would continue to allow us to strengthen democracy in Latin America. Thank you to all of you.
And now we offer to the heads of delegation the opportunity to comment on our current panel. And Canada, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. On behalf of my country, I'd like to thank the Secretariat for organizing this morning's session. Thank you to Maria Celina and others who play a critical role in this summit, a summit that will be very grateful for your contribution and your support.
Of the civil society who joined us today either remotely or in person, and social actors for your presentation who highlighted important contributions framed around the 5 thematic working groups. Canada works towards reducing poverty and building a more peaceful, inclusive, and prosperous world. Consistent with our feminist foreign policy and international assistance policy, Canada sees the empowerment of women and girls and gender equality as the most effective way to achieve this objective. Fostering strong partnerships in civil society and social actors and a safe and enabling environment in which they can work are essential to achieving these objectives. Civil society and social actors, organizations like you, have their own diverse purposes, priorities, capacities, and constraints. You bring valuable and unique experience, and you make important contribution. The advancement of gender equality underpins Canada's engagement in Latin America and the Caribbean. While there has been some progress, gender inequality remains, and there are still a number of challenges faced by women and girls every day. As we prepare for the Summit of the Americas, in a few weeks only, we have the opportunity to take an inclusive approach that leaves no one behind and addresses the need of women and girls, Indigenous peoples, peoples of African descent, migrants, LGBTI persons, and others. Canada also has the honor of co-chairing the Working Group of Democratic Governance with our colleagues from Panama, and we see this outcome document bringing several opportunities. One of them is to take an inclusive approach that leaves no one behind, as I just said. We also have the opportunity to be ambitious and to strengthen our level of commitments to human rights, to transparency, and gender equality. Lastly, but not the least, we see this as an opportunity to strengthen existing mechanisms in the region to address and tackle new and emerging threats to democracy and to improve the implementation of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which was adopted in 2001 following the Summit of the Americas in Quebec City. Thank you so much for your time today.
And thank you very much. Now, recognizing the delegate from Panama. Panama, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and welcome to the members of civil society who have participated in this consultation, in this hemispheric dialogue with civil society in the preparation for the 9th Summit of the Americas. The government of Panama is very pleased with this opportunity and this space for a significant exchange regionally on political, social, and economic priorities that should also be included in the work of this 9th Summit of the Americas. We consider that many of the concerns expressed and the recommendations expressed by civil society representatives along the lines of the 5 axes are included in the documents being negotiated today. In my role as coordinator of the Inter-American Action Plan on Democratic Governance, we understand that many of these concerns are already included in the document that has many objectives, such as strengthening representative democracy, sustainable development, and citizen participation, above all, as a key to the success of representative democracies. Many thanks to each of you for your recommendations. We face many challenges, and each country, in its own national capacity, will work to safeguard its own populations. This Summit of the Americas gives us the opportunity to improve the necessary conditions to leave no one behind. Thank you.
Very much. Recognizing the delegate from Peru.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish to express our gratitude to the representatives of civil society and wish to talk about the importance of governance and representative democracy as we continue to fight corruption. Particularly, we will seek to make inroads in the commitments of Lima and those recommendations of the Mississippi at the global level in the resolution of the Extraordinary General Assembly along these lines in 2021, and as well as the commissions established in the United Nations Conference on Corruption in Egypt. These commitments and the will of member states to continue strengthening these capacities to fight against one of the most important threats and the scourges that affect sustainable development in our countries will continue to be a key to the work done in the following months, and an important contribution from civil society, which is undoubtedly an important ally, but also a role in monitoring the important work done by our governments.
From the Dominican Republic, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Dominican Republic wishes to appreciate the great attention that exists because there are a number of agendas that are competing. The agenda of the past, overcoming authoritarianism and inequality in many aspects, and the agenda of the present, which has to do with overcoming the effects of COVID-19 and the pandemic, the problem of having access to updated information, and the generalized use of social networks, which promote hate, the incitement of hate and divisions in our society, as well as the agenda of the future, which calls for greater inclusion, greater participation by all members of society. In this regard, the Dominican Republic expresses a significant concern and shares with you what we are doing to try to contain this extremism and distortion of information in democratic processes. And our role, we understand, is to face these challenges, particularly in the need for greater participation of women and the protection of vulnerable groups, and to overcome the challenges of a transition to democracy that has lasted for more than 40 years in our country. Very particularly, the Dominican Republic has taken on a specific interest in the strengthening of the democratic charter of the Americas. And in this regard, we work so that in all spaces, particularly in regional and sub-regional institutions of a multilateral character, that we would continue perfecting the mechanisms in our democracies and to move forward progressively and continually, building on past successes in guaranteeing the rights for each and every citizen. We express our thanks for your commitment, for the work done, and for the succinct way in which you have presented your recommendations that no doubt gather the views and the sentiments of so many in our countries. And with great humility and optimism, we receive them.
Trinidad and Tobago, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, the delegation of Trinidad and Tobago is deeply grateful for the opportunity to engage in this very meaningful dialogue with the representatives of the civil society and other social actors in the hemisphere as part of this surge process. Chair, this delegation was patient in waiting to request the floor at this time, because from the perspective of this delegation, it is in fact the area of democratic governance in which we find coherence to all of the political commitments on which we are working as we prepare for the meeting of our heads in a month's time. It is in those political commitments that we find the very principles highlighted in the comments and remarks, very welcome presentations by our representatives from civil society and other social actors for resilience. It is in those very statements that we hear the principle of sustainability being echoed. It is in those remarks made by civil society actors and running through, cross-cutting all of the political commitments that we see an emphasis on the need for inclusion, and also we note the importance placed on the principle of equity. Chair, distinguished colleagues, it is from that perspective that you would recall that the delegation of Trinidad and Tobago has sought the support of other delegations in including in the title for the draft political commitment on energy transition the reference to an equitable transition. Chair, distinguished colleagues, as a national coordinator in Trinidad and Tobago, we have engaged very intensively with our civil society, our private sector, and our youth. And in all of those consultations, we have found resonance repeated here today on these very principles, and the delegation of Trinidad and Tobago wishes to reassure civil society actors, and I'm pleased to recognize particularly one of our own foremost civil society representatives as one of the spokespersons here this morning, Mrs. Gail Mohammed Oxley. The commitment of this delegation to ensure the inclusion of your inputs and remarks as we proceed to finalize these documents. The civil society for the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago represent a most important sector in ensuring that we achieve the best and most democratic governance. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you for that intervention. And seeing no other requests from delegations to speak, I want to offer our sincere thanks to each of you. And we turn now to two additional interventions. Natasha Jimenez and Terry Dale Inch. And if you could please come forward. So it's my pleasure first to offer the floor to Natasha Jimenez from the Foro Ciudadano de las Américas, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. El Foro Ciudadano.
The Citizen Forum of the Americas is a platform for dialogue and participation, and the contribution with civil society with the support of the State Department of the United States has carried out more than 100 events for the construction, for the building of support from civil society, where we have heard from 800 persons, 350 organizations in 15 countries in the region. With the chapters of the Citizen Forum and of Transparency International, we have put together a oversight or a follow-up session through the Citizen Observatory on Corruption. These were represented as a result of the plural dialogue that included the diversity of Latin American citizens, including indigenous nations, Afro-descendant peoples, and LGBTQ plus persons, as well as their organizations, religious actors, and faith-based organizations, amongst others. We would like to express some recommendations for the meetings prior to the Summit of the Americas, as well as to the follow-up for agreements achieved in the Summit of the Americas of this year. As regards activities to be carried out in June, we recommend that all agreements reached by the governments of the continent include the agreements already achieved by social actors and civil society on alternative solutions proposed. B, that they be explicitly inclusive as to the diversity of social actors and would include Afro-descendant peoples, indigenous communities, LGBTQ plus, persons with disabilities, girls, boys, teenagers, and the elderly, among others. That they be respectful of human rights and the standards of protection that exist from the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, that they guarantee minimal conditions for a true dialogue between governments and civil society, such as the presence and permanent participation of high-level government and other representatives during the civil society dialogues, so as to permit an exchange of views as well as finding of solutions. It is vital that solutions arrived at include the participation of civil society from a perspective of cooperation and not competition. This dialogue must recognize and to be safe places for dialogue, free of any discrimination, so that the complexity and diversity would not deter the ability to generate consensus and to have contributions and unified proposals to the governments. Follow-up must also include spaces for exchange of multi-actor knowledge and should also allow for work collectives and organizations to share their experience with a view to an inclusive, respectful, and transversal set of solutions. As much as possible, the contributions of civil society, such as training opportunities, diplomas, scholarships for leaders, men and women, and others, always with a view to training peers in this multi-actor space. Finally, broaden opportunities for participation that are focused on the differentiated and transsectoral approach that includes the protection of the most diverse and discriminated populations, so that those who have been historically discriminated may express their own efforts. Thank you.
Very much. And now we offer the floor to Terry De Lynch, representing women's organizations, and she comes to us from the CEDAW Committee of Trinidad and Tobago, of course, CEDAW referring to the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. From all of the member states, my fellow civil society representatives, and civil actors. The idea that women's rights are human rights was first articulated by abolitionist Sarah Moore Gremke and Angelina Gremke Weld in the late 1830s. In 1993, 45 years later, after the Universal Declaration on Human Rights was adopted at the UN and 9 years after CEDAW came into force, the UN Women World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna confirmed that women's rights were indeed human rights. Women's organizations have been consistent over the years in demanding the 2 R's. Resources required to ensure our women's rights are secured through policies, and respect. Respect for us and our contributions in our diversity toward building a more equitable and resilient society. So women's organizations are encouraging governments today on a number of specific areas. 1, recognize the legal and binding obligations of treaties and other agreements such as CEDAW, the Belém do Pará, the Montevideo Strategy for the Implementation of the Regional Gender Agenda within the Sustainable Development Framework, and other regional mechanisms previously signed and or ratified by governments and fulfill their obligations, such as timely country reporting and implementing non-discriminatory policies. 2, leverage tools that are already available, such as gender-responsive budgeting, and apply a gender-responsive recovery approach to rebuilding, which includes meaningful engagement by women's society organizations to contribute toward policy development that is transformative, inclusive, and sustainable. 3, close the outstanding wage gaps that continue in formal sectors while addressing the informal sector, which is overwhelmingly filled by women who work in poor and healthy working conditions without social safety mechanisms such as health insurance or paid leave, rendering them vulnerable to any change in the economy. In 2018, more than 50% of women between the ages of 20 and 24 stated that their domestic burden was the primary reason they did not seek paid work. Existing structural barriers such as sexual division of labor, where women have the greatest responsibility for the care of dependent persons, prevent women from achieving economic autonomy. The COVID-19 pandemic has widened existing gaps. Before the pandemic, 64.5% of women were in the workforce, compared to 94.1% of men, and this excludes single women. However, during the pandemic, 1 in 4 women in high-level positions considered reducing their work responsibilities, taking a leave of absence, or leaving the workforce altogether due to the overload of unpaid work. Before the pandemic, women spent 3 times more than men in unpaid care at home, which increased during quarantine periods, further impacting the permanence of women in the formal and informal sectors, which begs the question, has poverty been feminized? Finally, we want you to recommit to the leadership and participation of women and the representation of women's agenda, articulated in Quebec City in 2001, which is underrepresented as evidenced by the current low representation of women among the heads of states of governments in our region. Strengthen policies which encourage political parties to include the full participation of women in the process of selection and representation by promoting measures outlined in Article 4 of the CEDAW that would result in an increase of women representatives in line with the percentage of women in society. We have achieved much in promoting women's rights in recent years, but if nothing else, the COVID-19 pandemic has clearly demonstrated that there is still much more to be done. And in attaining the goals that we have set for ourselves, we will bring about more equitable societies that are better equipped to meet the challenges of the post-pandemic era. Every citizen of every one of our countries has a significant role to play in the developmental issues that must be addressed in the months and years ahead. Governmental agencies working with civil society will be a focal point in the realization of more equitable societies. Today must see us striding forward positively on that journey together. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Greatly appreciated. And now the chair invites heads of delegation to comment on or respond to observations made. And Colombia, you have the floor.
Gracias. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Once again, I wanted to express my gratitude for the contributions to the spokesmen, the women's spokesman, and what we'd like to underscore how you take into account 50% of the population. That's what's important about women. They're 50% of the population. I believe the states have worked in a cross-cutting fashion in all the political commitments in this way, incorporating this aspect, I think, and everything that's going to have a direct impact on the women of the hemisphere. Obviously, we're going to be looking closely at the details of the recommendations you put forward to see what we're missing and what we have as draft and in the state's commitments. Thank you very much.
Recognizing the delegate from Brazil, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank each and every representative of civil society organizations that made it a presentation at this session of the CIRG this morning, as well the Secretariat for the efforts to conducting this discussion with the different actors from civil society. That is both the Summit Secretariat and it takes this very seriously, and this is in part of the preparations of the upcoming 9th summit. It's important to see the diversity of views and demands and perspectives. And this is part of our national dialogues, which has began in 2021, a year ago, and that led to the documents that are to be submitted to the consideration of our government. The 5 thematic documents has measures set forth there and that have come about as a result of meetings with civil society. We hope that this diversity of views can be adequately reflected in the different discussions that take place in the week of June 6th in Los Angeles, and to the benefit of the populations of our countries. Thank you very much.
And recognizing the delegate from the United States, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Simply from the U.S. Chair, wanted to thank the representatives of civil society today who informed our discussions on the summit's major themes. In particular, the U.S. delegation would also like to acknowledge the critical role of civil society in helping us, all of us, realize our cross-cutting goals to work together to achieve equitable growth and ensure diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in our decision-making and implementation of the summit's outcomes. We heard you reference these concerns directly in your recommendations, and we welcome your consistent advocacy of these issues and your proposals in particular for how our governments can partner more effectively with you to realize the promise of the 9th Summit. Thank you.
Recognizing the delegate from Barbados.
Thank you, Chair. I am being indulgent. I really couldn't resist. Being a female head of the Foreign Service of Barbados and coming from a country which has a female president and a female prime minister, I wanted to say that in Barbados, we're trying to walk the talk of the commitments that we are, or the call for the commitments that we are hearing today, especially from the representative of the CEDAW Committee of Trinidad and Tobago. And I thank you for that call. CEDAW has always been very important for Barbados, and we continue to pay a lot of attention to it in the international community. And I wouldn't want us also to forget or not to recognize the fact that in this hemisphere, we have the Inter-American Commission of Women, SIM, and that is an institution in which Barbados has historically played a very great part. So I'd like to thank you both for your participation. Thank you.
Recognizing the delegate from Costa Rica.
Thank you, Chairman. Costa Rica would just like to join in to the words of gratitude to all the civil society organizations who have put forward their concerns. We've listened carefully, and indeed, we've found a lot of agreement and coincidence with the discussions that we've held ourselves over these last days and weeks. Our concern is that all of these coincidences, this concurring of the ideas be reflected in our final draft. And this is an asset for us, and we must reflect the wide diversity of our populations and will serve to strengthen our systems, that is, our health and education systems, to the benefit of our population. To have this cut across everything, and this gender-based perspective as well must be reflected too. So Costa Rica is grateful for the recommendations and reiterates its commitment to continue to work together with civil society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now taking the opportunity to recognize the delegate from Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, recognizing that we're already on the schedule, halfway through our break, I'm yet obliged, truly obliged to request the floor, just briefly to again express the appreciation of this delegation and certainly the government of Trinidad and Tobago for the inclusion of the role, well, representatives of the very important role played by women in development. That is what we are dealing with here, recognizing that there will really be no sustainable development without women. And Chair, distinguished colleagues, I'm sure you would understand that as a delegation, we would be obliged to recognize one of our national heroes, recognize with one of our nation's awards, having received the Medal for Women in Development, Gold, Miss Terry Dale Ince. It is always an honor and pleasure, I'm sure, for any of our countries to be able to recognize one of our national heroes and the role that she has played over many years and representing again the commitment of Trinidad and Tobago to the advancement of women's rights and empowerment. Thank you very much. I'm much obliged and grateful for your time, Chair. Thank you.
After such fine presentations, I don't think that these representatives, these delegates from Barbados or Trinidad are being indulgent at all. I would like to take a brief moment to ask Ambassador Lambert to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I just at the close of this session wanted to take the floor to thank all of the representatives, not only for the close coordination that they have pursued with the summit's secretariat along the way as we have been developing the process towards this hemispheric dialogue, but also for their very effective representation of the over 2,000 participants who have registered to date. In their very tight and concise presentations, they have rendered and channeled a very broad participation in this event, which I think is a tremendous accomplishment. And in particular, regarding the last sessions, I would like to extend a particular thanks to the Citizens Forum of the Americas. Natasha Jimenez, please extend to your colleagues the thanks from the summit's Secretariat. You have been very effective co-collaborators and co-creators with us along this journey, and it's very much appreciated. And further to the participation of Terry Dale Ince, who brings, I think it's fair to say, that one of the most important qualitative improvements in this cycle of the summit's participation has been that of gender participation in the civil society outreach process, the effective gathering of views from women's groups, NGOs, and stakeholders around the hemisphere. So I thank you for your comments, but I also thank the encouragement that we have received from the countries around the table on achieving that end, and particularly noteworthy is that the contribution we have received from Canada to underwrite part of that contribution, which has been most welcome. So thank you very much to all.
And finally, if I can make one or two observations, partially in response to the kind words of our delegate from Trinidad, noting that the coffee is awaiting, that as I was marking time here, it was the diplomats that ran over time, not the representatives from civil society organizations. It's a professional, well, we're diplomats, what can I say? Finally, I wish to assure both delegates and participants who've taken the time to appear before us today, and also to refine the inputs from so many other people, that the summit's secretariat will distribute each of these recommendations to the governments participating in this summit process. And I wish to thank you all, and we very much appreciate your participation today, this morning. Thank you, and we'll take a break at this point.